it is an absolute honor. And yes, hi guys, I am Kristen. I am located in Greenville, South Carolina. I am a single mother of two wonderful children. And I had my entire life burned down and collapse, and all the things that you could imagine pretty much happened within the span of 9 months. So I'll take you guys back to January of 21 is when it all started. My mother suddenly passed away. And at the time, I was going through a separation. In the state of South Carolina, you have to be separated for a year in order to get a divorce. And I also owned an autism service company. So we were the second largest provider in the state of South Carolina. And my father was our medical biller. So he suddenly stopped billing for our company. And we had to figure out how to continue services while not getting paid by the state because we were struggling to be able to find how to bill correctly. So I had my mother die, and then I had my company slowly collapsing, and then I was going through a divorce, and then my father suddenly became ill. And so my father had a massive stroke in July of 21. And I spent the majority of my time flying in between Greenville to Baltimore, where he was hospitalized, and I had to become his primary care advocate. So during this time, then I started stepping away from the company, and it became really difficult for me to be able to breathe and learn how to become a single mother and learn how to navigate a business that was crumbling and wasn't showing much signs that it was going to make it. So during this time, I also drained my entire savings to try to cover gaps in the company. And then I started taking out personally guaranteed loans to try to float payrolls so that we didn't have to interrupt services for those children on the spectrum. And then once my father passed is when I turned to drinking in order to numb myself. It was too much. I just couldn't handle it anymore. So I slowly started going down the hole of drinking to numb my pain. I was lucky, actually, everyone around me was lucky if I showered every 2 weeks. If I got out of bed, the only thing that I was able to do was truly make my children meals and make sure that they were clean and had clean clothes. Other than that, I really wasn't functioning too well. So it wasn't until I went to a trauma conference in, I'm sorry, April of 23 that I saw other people speaking about how they overcame addictions and the mess that their lives was. And I met my future mentor there. Her name was Jamie Hess, and she said to me, Kristen, you could make your mess your message. And you don't have to be like this. And it was the first time that I think anyone ever kindly looked at me as an addict and said, you don't have to do this, and it's not your fault, but it is your fault if you choose not to overcome this. So I decided in May of 23 to check myself into a detox center. And I have been sober now for officially over 2 years. May 10th was my 2-year sobriety anniversary. I went into another, yay, thank you. I went into another realm of business, which was doing business credit for business owners so that they could avoid doing personally guaranteed loans because I ended up getting sued a lot. I'm very well versed in the legal system here in South Carolina due to my previous company's failure because we had to shut the doors and I was left with all those personal guarantees. And unfortunately, that didn't work out either. So I had to take a big step back and say, okay, why am I here? What is my purpose? Because finding my purpose, I always thought was working with children on the autism spectrum. But I think that, all of this stuff, a lot of people have the option to be comfortable. And I kind of, when I reevaluated everything, I was like, I've never been able to step back into being comfortable because whenever I did, it would burn down on fire. So I ended up starting a company called the Phoenix Code, which is where I help women take their trauma and turn it into their voice and their power. So now I help women overcome that trauma because there's so much more to trauma than just your brain. There's the book, Your Body Keeps the Score. So it embeds into the fascia of your muscles. And then, it is my belief that you should have a relationship with God or some kind of higher power. So I intertwine that into it as well. And then, of course, I have my master's in psychology with an emphasis in human behavior. So I also intertwine that into my methodology as well.
Thank you for sharing that. The first thing I
Yeah.
would ask is the celebration of your anniversary. How does that feel?
Oh, it felt so wonderful. I actually got a phoenix tattoo for it. And it's one of those ones that addiction is something that people really don't talk about. People tend, at least when I was an addict, let me not speak broadly. I'll speak to my own experience. When I was going through it and really struggling with alcohol, I was constantly judged for it. And, that judgment didn't help me get sober. It was the people who came in and said, like, hey, it's okay. You're going through a lot, but at some point you're going to have to feel these feelings that you're trying not to feel. And even being sober for 2 years, feeling this feeling sometimes is really difficult. Just a few weeks ago, I was like, "Ooh, this is really rough." But it's nice because now I have the tools on my tool belt in order to handle tough situations without turning back to drinking, which I think is the big gap between, getting sober and staying an addict, is that you have to get those tools because life's not going to get super easy all of a sudden. That's just not how it works. But if you have those tools, you can overcome those hardships a lot easier.
I'm glad you shared that because over the last couple of years, Kristen, I'll share with you, I've come across people who have addiction has impacted their family, either them directly, their children, or maybe the people around them, right?
Yeah.
And there is times where I would hear people pass judgment, especially if, let's say, the impact is so great that they lose a family member, like a child was doing drugs or alcohol or women or gambling, whatever the case is, right?
Yeah.
And I always found it a little bit interesting because if you look at society as a whole, if you're suffering from an addiction, depending on the type of addiction it is, we look at you differently,
Yeah.
right? And
It's very
then
true.
if it's impacting your children, we look at the parents differently as well, right? Like some people will say that they're weak. How come they can't be sober for their children?
Yeah.
What were some of your most difficult moments when you're hearing the background noises as you're trying to overcome this? And you're like, I'm making progress today, but now I'm hearing the chirping in the background. Like, how difficult was that journey for you?
It was extremely difficult. I lost a lot of people during that time period. I had a best friend of 17 years who literally said to me, I just don't understand why you can't get sober. And I said, well, I hope you don't have to ever understand what I'm going through. And it wasn't, and again, I didn't, the way that I needed it, I need people to be tough on me, but I also need to be shown some compassion because that was more than humanly possible to go through. And, now I look back at my journey and I forgive myself for coping that way. I didn't know how to do it any better. So, but there was a lot of people, my ex-husband still likes to hold it over my head. Well, you were an alcoholic for a year and a half. And I'm like, yeah, I was. And my children suffered greatly for it. And now I'm trying to do better for them. And they see it. They see that I'm happy for the first time pretty much ever in my life. I'm genuinely happy because not only did I kick the addiction, but I kicked all the other things that weren't serving me to be happy. And now I've really learned how to say no to things that I don't want to do and kind of become, I don't want to use the word selfish, but it's kind of selfish. Only do the things that really are what I want to do. Because the truth is, if I'm doing the things that I don't want to do, I'm not putting my full effort into them and they're not going to turn out great.
As I got older, I realized that that thick line between selfishness and self love has gotten thinner and thinner and thinner,
Yes.
right? And
Yes.
you begin to realize you're like, yeah, my 20s, I was selfish. 30s and 40s, that's self love, baby. Like, like your perspective has changed. What are some of the emotions that actually, let me ask you this question. Were you surprised that someone who had the success that you did fell into this type of situation?
Oh, of course, when you come from, because I was a seven-figure earner and it was surprising because, you're not supposed to be, you're supposed to have it all together and you're supposed to have this wonderful white picket expense life. And that's actually, I started doing social media is a new thing for me. And that was actually one of my last videos that I did was I was like, I had it all. If you would have looked at my life from the outside, even when I was going through it, you would have been like, look at her. She's a boss. She's got this great company. She's married. She's got the kids. She's got this dream house. She's going on luxury vacations. I felt dead inside. Like I just didn't feel alive. And, that probably was another reason why I went to an addiction too, because it made me feel more than just, oh. So, sorry, that's like the best way I can put it. It's just, it's hard because you expect certain people to not fall into it. But the truth is, so here's a great example. I went to the bank 2 weeks ago, met with a new woman who I'd never met before. She's looking at my credit and she's just like, what in the world happened here? And I told her all about the personal guarantees, the lawsuits, everything like that. She's like, oh, I've seen you in here a lot with another banker. Why are you here? And I was like, oh, that's my parents' estate, which still isn't closed because I had to fight one of my brothers on everything. And then she just breaks down in tears. And she was like, I have recently been hospitalized multiple times because of alcohol. And, I'm going through a lot of familial stuff. And she just kind of laid it all out there. And she was like, but you're so open about your story. And I was like, I think people need to be because the truth is we're all going through something. And we're taught in this social media culture to look all perfect and prime and, beautiful all the time. But the truth is that sometimes when we're hurting, other people need to see that they're not alone in that hurt. And so that's one of the reasons why I do like to get my story out there, just to let people know, like, hey, there is another side. I promise you just got to push through.
When you look at how far you've come from yourself and your family, was there ever a point in your life where you thought back and you're like, I don't know if I can do this?
Oh gosh, yes. And I totally skipped over that part. I'm sorry. I was suicidal for a year and a half. I got the little jitters. But yes, I was suicidal and it was really tough. One of my coaches asked me to write thank you letters because I was in abusive relationships basically the majority of my adult life. And she was like, you have to write thank you letters to everyone. And I was like, no thanks. Like, what good came out of all of that? But honestly, the biggest thanks is to my ex-husband. And being that I knew that I couldn't commit suicide because if I did, my children wouldn't be guaranteed to be fed and guaranteed to have a roof over their head and things like that. So that was one of the biggest things is finding the gratitude in situations like that because I actually another story too. I recently remodeled my bathroom and I kept the mirrors and it was my tribute to my old self that used to bawl in them, who just didn't want to be alive. And it was to that girl like, hey, look, girl, we made it. We did it. And so that's the only thing I kept in my bathroom.
I have, instead of mirrors, I have luggage from the day that I experienced trauma that I didn't know if I was going to overcome it. And I did. And this was 20 something years ago. I
Really?
still have that luggage beat up, bruised
Yeah.
up, zipper broken. I still have it because that reminds me of the day my trauma started and reminds me of the day my trauma ended. And when you wrote those letters, was there a point where you thought about doing something similar for your family because maybe they've gone through something as well?
So, my mom died of alcoholism at 69. And so, yes, I have, it's really neat that my mom and I did not have a great relationship. There was a lot of emotional and mental abuse growing up as a child. But learning more, I called my cousin one night. This is back in September. It was pretty recent. I called my cousin and I was like, hey, what happened in that family? Because they all died very young of either drugs or alcohol. And so I went back and I learned more about who she was as a person, what happened to her as a child. And it gave me a new sense of gratitude for how she raised me because I understood that she did better than what she had. And now my job is to do better than what she did. And my daughter actually said this to a substitute teacher a couple of weeks ago before school got out. She got really sad about the divorce. And I've been divorced for 6 years. But she was like, I'm really sad that my mom and dad are divorced, but my mom did it so that we could have a better life than she had. growing up. And now my job when I have children is to do a better job than what she did. And so it's neat to see that trickle down because she acknowledges that yeah, mom messed up a lot, but she's really trying to be able to make it better. But now I get to learn from mom's mistakes. And so it's really neat to be able to see that family dynamic and hoping that I broke the generational curse of the alcoholism so it does not go down to my children.
There always has to be that one person that says, I'm going to take on the burden of the family and I'm going to break that trauma.
Yep. Yeah, that's been a fun one because there's a lot of trauma in my family.
And when you share the alcoholism for your mother, I always found it interesting myself how certain behaviors pass down and you don't realize it until you going through it. Now that you're looking back, are you kind of sad that you repeated what your mother went through, what your parents went through, but ultimately you're able to beat it and you know that your daughter is looking to not repeat it as well?
Yeah, there was definitely a long time where even when I was an alcoholic, I was like, I can't be like my mom. I can't be like my mom, but I couldn't stop. And again, it comes down to that tool belt. I wasn't equipped with the coping mechanisms in order to not become an addict. So now I look at myself and I give myself a lot of grace. I've done a lot of work on myself inside, and I've really have looked and said, it's okay. It's okay, Kristen, because at the end of the day, it was a year and a half and he pulled through and he figured it out. And now we get to shape the rest of our children's lives so that they have the tools that you didn't have and to be able to do that. So it definitely was, but again, I really have forgiven myself for it because if I held it against me, then I wouldn't be able to help other people.
For the parents out there who's looking to identify these tools and use them, what are some of the tips that you can share with them to help them identify the tools that they have already and maybe some of the tools that they can look to obtain?
Yeah, so it really does depend on the person. This is going to sound a little silly, but one of the things that really helps me is there is an acupressure point right. Can you see my hand? There we go, right here. And so I would squeeze it whenever I started to get really stressed out about something. And with that acupressure point, it actually brings you back to the present moment so that you don't have to be worried about, the future, or you don't have to be upset about the past. It brings you right back into that present moment. Meditating is a big one for me, to learn. And again, I think a lot of it comes down to being in the present moment. Because when you are so upset about the past or you're living in the future with anxiety, because that's what anxiety is, it's worrying about what's happening in the future, you can't live in the moment. And at the end of the day, stuff is going to happen 100%. Things are going to happen, but you're going to be worrying about it, it's not going to change it. And then beating yourself up over things that you did in the past isn't going to change it either. So just being here now and then working constantly on yourself to be able to evolve is a big way to get those tools as well.
Someone put in the chat that forgiving yourself was key to my healing. How did you forgive yourself? What did you do or what did you say?
Yes. Oh gosh, how did I forgive myself? That's a really good one. So I did a lot of affirmations, is what one of my coaches helped me with. But the thing about affirmations is it's not just looking in the mirror and saying, hey, it's okay that we did this. You have to learn how to actually embody that feeling. And so it was really just taking a deep breath. I journaled a lot. I journaled so much. I said that it was my first book. I'm pretty sure it's just a journal, and it's like 170 pages of just everything that happened, everything I felt during it, and just identifying, okay, like what serves me now? What can I still hold on to? What do I not need to hold on to? And I'm constantly also working with coaches right now. I have two coaches that I work with because I still have trauma that I'm working on. I'm not perfect. I'm still working on a lot. And, some of the emotions that have come up recently for me are grief. So the past week, my coach was like, how you feeling? And I was like, I'm sad, and I realized that I was grieving the mom that I wish that I could have been. But then I took the positive side of it. So, and I'm not one of those always be positive people. Sometimes you just have to cry. Sometimes you just have to scream, definitely let it out. Not always be positive. But the cool thing that I saw with the grief is that if I was the mother that I wish that I could have been, my children wouldn't be as strong as they are. And yes, they've had a tough life. We've all had a tough life. I've messed up more times than I would ever care to admit. But that my daughter now has those tools because she's lived it at a young age. So she had her first boyfriend. Apparently he got in her face. This is a recess boyfriend. Got in her face at recess, and she was like, "You will not speak to me that way." And she said, "We're done." And I kept her home the next day to do an ice cream date because I was like, that's a tool that I didn't have. And, I wanted everyone to love me so much that I would put up with anything in order to keep people into my lives. And so it's sorry, did that answer your question?
It did, and it was a perfect segue because the example you gave with your daughter, I hear a lot of parents when they see that or they hear it, they reflect on themselves at that age and they're like, I don't think I would have done that. I think I would have allowed the person to continue to treat me that way. Why do you
Yeah.
think parents, when they look at what their children are going through and they behave in a way that is maybe safeguarding themselves, they look back and they're like, I wouldn't have done that. Why do you think
Yeah.
parents have that train of thought?
I think it probably is you're taking a big step back and you're seeing the fact that, your child's loving themselves. And that's where I think a lot of women that I work with, and myself included, and especially, I didn't love myself enough to ever put up boundaries or to stand up for myself or anything like that. So I think it's cool when you take that step back and you're able to look at the way that your child's handling things different than you did. And it's in a way that you're kind of like, yeah, this is awesome. I think parents, like, one of the biggest things too, and could I just say this to all the parents? If you're questioning if you are a good parent or not, you're most likely a very good parent. Just because you're worried about your children, you're worried about how they're adapting to things and how they're going to move differently than you did. And that's a big thing for me because, I wanted this cookie cutter, perfect mom life, Instagram, Pinterest life, but that's not what we got. And I messed up a lot, but I look at my children and I hear the feedback that their teachers give and things like that, and they're doing really well now. So, worrying if you're a good parent or not, most likely you are.
I agree. If you're concerned with your performance as a parent or a caretaker, then deep down you have a certain standard that you want to obtain for them. You mentioned something that I found interesting, and I'd like to get your opinion on it. When you mentioned that you were seeking out love, why do you think you're seeking a love outward instead of inward?
That's a great question. So, I've done a lot of inner child work, is what I like to call it. And I identified that, my mom was very emotionally abusive and mentally abusive with me. I was a burden to her. And everything was always working for her to love me. And then when I left that dynamic of living with my parents and I went into, going to college and things like that, I was always seeking it with someone else. Like, just someone love me, someone validate me, like, tell me I'm lovable, show me I'm lovable. And that's what ended up getting me into the most abusive situations because I would tolerate pretty much anything just to be shown love that wasn't really love. And so when I learned how to finally, I've been single a very long time because I wanted to work on myself because I finally got out of the last relationship 4 years ago and I was like, oh, wait, I'm the common denominator. Okay, why am I putting up with this kind of abuse? And again, it was learning to show myself grace. I didn't know better. And then really learning how to find myself again and like, who am I? What do I like to do? Why am I always bowing down to these certain kind of behaviors? And then just really learning to create a life that I love and that I enjoy.
That that is so true. I'm looking back at my life and I'm wondering, I learned that I wish I learned that sooner than later, right? Because I look back, right? And I think we all have that difficult point in our life where we look back or like, man, that 1 year, 2 years, it felt like 10.
Yeah. Yeah. Lived multiple lifetimes in that little tiny span. But it's cool because I also look at it as it's an evolution. If you're living multiple lifetimes, that means that you're changing. And I think that, my saying is, I don't want to be the same person I was yesterday. I want to be better than I was yesterday. I don't do New Year's resolutions because every day is my new resolution. What can I do better than I did yesterday? Okay, I lost my temper here. Why did I lose my temper? So a cool thing that one of my coaches gave me is the question why. And this is so simple. And it is, okay, why did I do that? Or why did that trigger me? Okay. And then you answer that. Okay, well, why do I feel that way? Okay, what embedded into that? And it's just constantly breaking it down, the whys, until you really find the bottom. And so for me, it was, anger. I was so angry at this situation. Well, why was I angry? Oh, I was angry because it was out of my control. Okay, cool. So why am I upset that I'm not in control of this? Oh, okay, because I'm truly grieving the person that I thought that I would become and things like that. So really just breaking down everything into why segments has also been really helpful as well too.
So as before I let you go, of course, Kristen, I'm going to give you three wishes,
Okay.
okay, for this question. What are three things you wish parents knew about the parents that they wish they could be when they're becoming parents, and why?
Oh, okay. Things that parents wish that they knew. That's it. Things that parents, okay. Things that parents wish that they knew. Um, I think one of the biggest things is they don't need fancy things. Kids don't need fancy things. They're happy with boxes, but you know what lights my kids up the most is when I have my phone down completely far away from me. We are not distracted by technology and we are just together present in that moment, doing whatever they want to do, whether it's building a fort or playing a game or anything. They don't because I think there's a lot of pressure by society that, oh, my kid has to have the latest Xbox or whatever the newest trend is. But my kids are so happy when they have my full attention and when it is just me down on the ground playing with them. So I think that would be a big one.